Okay, I know this is like a total jerk thing for me to say, but I'll be honest, I was happy when James Harden struggled to start this year. I've always hated his cheap fouls and how he cheats the game. I grew up a Houston Rockets fan, but I fell out of love with my own team because of James Harden. I just couldn't watch Harden stand at the free throw line all day. Then they changed the rules and took away his superpower. But now it looks like we were all wrong about James Harden. He's back to his old tricks. But how? James Harden is the reason the NBA changed these rules. I know that other guys started copying him, but Harden was the GOAT at foul baiting. And it all started when he got to H-Town. Dude won a Sixth Man of the Year in OKC, but they didn't reward him with a big enough contract, so he got his own team. The Rockets GM Daryl Morey was thrilled because Harden was perfect for how he wanted to play basketball. All shots at the rim or from three, the most efficient way to play the game, and getting to the line. And nobody drew more fouls than the Beard. Once Harden got to Houston, he took the second most free throws that season, then the fourth, then the first, and the first. He drew more fouls on threes than Dame and Steph combined in Houston. But the way he did it made me sick. Harden became a master at drawing cheap fouls. When defenders put their hands out, he would initiate the contact while driving. When he would come around screens, as soon as he felt contact, Harden would just chuck it up and get 3 free throws. Fans were yelling at referees like, oh, that's not a foul. But actually, yeah, it was. The Rockets didn't care about beautiful basketball, just winning games. Daryl Morey was so into analytics, he thought Harden was the best offensive player ever. Old school stats like field goal percentage only tell you how efficient a guy is from shots that he hits from the field. But what about free throws? There was a game in December 2013 where Harden scored 27 points with only 2 shots from the field. How do you measure that?
Someone asked me who's a better scorer, him or Michael Jordan, and then it's just factual that James Harden is a better scorer than Michael Jordan.
Based on the math.
Based on literally, you give James Harden the ball, and before you're giving up the ball, how many points do you generate, which is how you should measure offense. James Harden is by far number one.
Well, turns out there's a stat that does. It is called points per shot attempt. It takes into account field goals and free throws. And Morey said Harden was a god. The NBA tried to stop that for the first time in 2018 with the Harden rule. It said that the offensive player can't be the one to initiate the contact, and they have to actually be in the act of shooting to get continuation. So what happened? Harden started slow, but he still led the league in fouls drawn. He just found new ways to bend the rules. And before you knew it, there were other young players coming up who were inspired by James Harden. But what if the league went even further? What if they put in 4 different rules to stop the Beard and take away his superpower? Well, that's exactly what they did before this season. Rule number 1 said a shooter cannot launch himself into a defender to draw contact. If he does, it's an offensive foul. Rule number 2, a player who's dribbling can't just veer off his path randomly and bump into the defender. If he does, that's an offensive foul. Rule number 3 got rid of the leg kick. It became super popular for a shooter to just whack the defender with his leg while he's in the air, make it look like he got fouled. Now, that's a foul on the shooter. And the final rule was a classic James Harden move: hooking the defender with his arm. Before, if a defender reached in at all, then the shooter would just begin his motion and hook their arms together. This was not playing basketball, this was playing the rules. And that hit James hard through the first 12 games this season. He averaged 4.7 free throw attempts, the worst since his second season. And because of that, he averaged under 20 points a game, which hadn't happened since he was in OKC. It looked like Harden finally was just another above average player. I mean, it makes sense if you played one way your entire life and then they changed the rules and you're 32 years old, how are you going to adapt to that? If that was true for Harden, then the Nets were screwed. I mean, they're already missing Kyrie Irving this season. KD can't carry the team as the only superstar player. But then something changed in mid-November. Starting November 12th against the Pelicans, Harden began to draw foul after foul, and in that time period, he got to the line more than any player in the NBA. In Orlando, while KD was out, Harden controlled the game, hit 19 of 20 free throws. How did he do that? Well, Harden's a basketball genius is how he did that. He's not washed. He just needed some time to adjust. The way he's getting to the line now is by driving hard into the lane and just seeing what happens. Sometimes he makes a shot, sometimes he draws a foul, the old-fashioned way. The difference between Harden and somebody like Damian Lillard is the beard is big. I mean, dude looks out of shape, sure, but he can still ball out. He throws his weight around and he is able to drive into like 3 defenders without any fear he's gonna get hurt. He still draws fouls on threes, by the way, but Harden's skill has always been about more than just free throws. He's one of the best passers in the NBA. His ball handling is top 5.
Both. I do think, though, that the referees are starting to figure out, what's still a foul, what's still a basketball foul, and what's a non-basketball play or whatever the mandate says. I think early it was difficult, for them to know where the line was. And now, he's such a difficult guy to cover with his size, speed, quickness, ability to shoot over anyone from 3 that, guys have to get too close to him. And then he's so strong that once he gets a slight angle on you or step on you, it's almost impossible not to foul him, because if it's either get out of the way or you're going to draw contact. So, that's what makes him brilliant, is his ability to penetrate, to take contact, and to, be able to dictate what happens when that contact happens.
Obviously, this is huge for the Nets because they need James to be at his best, but the real test will be in the playoffs. Harden has a history of melting down in the biggest games, and I don't think these rule changes would have anything to do with that one way or the other. But it's also huge for Harden's career. This dude is about to test free agency for the first time in his life. He refused to sign a new contract in Brooklyn before this season, and he'll be able to pick his team after this year. People were talking like he's an idiot for not signing, but now we can see he'll be just fine and he will cash in after this season, however it turns out. And I know some of you really disagree with what Daryl Morey said about Harden being better than Michael Jordan, and in some ways I do too, but back in the day, an old AM Hoops video that not many people have seen actually, this is a really, really deep dive into what Morey actually said.